Well, welcome everybody to our newest series in the Unlocking Vertex AI podcast, webcast, whatever we're calling it these days. So today I've got with me Adam Harvey, who comes out of our Salesforce business. And so Adam, if you want to introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi Caleb, thanks for inviting me. So like you said, I joined TTEC Digital this past year in February after spending 12 years at the Salesforce mothership. So had a really good run at Salesforce, working through a number of different departments there. I started my journey as a solutions engineer in the commercial teams. I always say that's a nice place to start at Salesforce. You get a lot of at-bats there. You learn the kind of core value messaging of Salesforce and the core value of their platform. And then I spent the prior 6-7 years working with our consumer business services vertical, which is a lot of professional services, talent services. So working with a lot of the key partners on the Salesforce side there as well. And yeah, happy to be part of our emerging and growing Salesforce practice at TTEC now.
Awesome. So Adam, when we were talking recently, we were getting into some of the announcements between what Google and Salesforce are doing together. I know Salesforce is, obviously got a significant presence when it comes to the AI side of things with Agentforce. Google's doing their thing with everything from agent space to dialogue flow to pick the new, whatever's going to be the next thing with Gemini. And so I'd love to get your take, because there's clearly a crossover, cross-section of Google and Salesforce working together. And many of our customers have both of these platforms. And just kind of get your ideas, get your thoughts on kind of what does this all mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So an absolutely massive partnership is developed between these two organizations very rapidly and quickly, but not surprisingly either. It's essentially kind of like a three-pronged partnership, it feels like. So starting at the highest level, there's an infrastructure component. And I don't think this directly impacts our downstream clients that much, but it certainly does sort of impact the overall partnership. And what I mean by infrastructure is Salesforce moved from their traditional multi-tenant hosted infrastructure that they managed themselves for probably close to 15 years to a Hyperforce infrastructure about 5 years ago. That was primarily based on moving to a more modern public cloud infrastructure, but also we saw a ton of issues with data residency and regulations that were continuously changing and popping up internally at Salesforce.
Okay.
What that meant was we'd see a lot of our large enterprise customers bifurcating their Salesforce instances from 1 or 2 instances to oftentimes 5, 10, 20 instances just to data residency requirements. So Hyperforce was built to enable better scale for them, but also to meet some of the stringent data residency requirements that they need to meet on a daily basis for their enterprise clients. And that initially was a partnership on just the Amazon side. They've now expanded it to be Amazon, Azure, and now Google Cloud.
Okay.
And now have the choice as a customer where you want to host your data, meaning you can specifically pick your regions and also pick your provider. Like I said, I don't think that's a massive impact to a downstream customer, but at an organizational level, massive boon for Google, obviously. They've got one of the largest hosting providers in the world running Hyperforce on the Google Cloud now. And for Salesforce, it gives them a ton of flexibility, and for the customers downstream to have that choice as well where they want to host. So that one, great for the organization, not so much for the everyday guy. Where it gets interesting for our consumers is at the application and data level. So, and specifically when we think about AI. So at the application level, we here at TTEC Digital do a ton of work within call centers and call center ops. We're seeing that the CES technology on the Google side is now well integrated with Salesforce Service Cloud. So much like we see with every other CCaaS provider, there's a great marriage of this intelligent agent desktop with a leading CCaaS provider in the Google CES solution. But when we look at the agentic side of it, that's where I think it gets really interesting. So Agentforce is a very agnostic AI development tool, let's call it that. You don't develop a model in Agentforce the same way you do in Vertex AI. What you do is you leverage pretty much any LLM you want to drive your agentic experience. So when they shipped Agentforce 2 years ago, it shipped out of the box with your GPT models, a couple of the Azure models, I think Sage was in there. And they've continued to expand the offerings through these partnerships they've made. So no wonder that Gemini is now one of the out-of-the-box models you can use when you're building an agent in Agentforce. So that's cool, but I think where it gets very interesting for this partnership is when we think about Vertex AI and the ability for you to customize and configure and develop your own model. You now can very easily lift that and shift it into Agentforce and leverage it within your Salesforce ecosystem there. So that's a really cool one. But these agents are only as good as the data that can power them. Salesforce realized that really quickly. And luckily, I always say, I don't know if they stumbled into Data Cloud or it was a strategic decision. They had Data Cloud sitting around as a CDP platform prior to the advent of generative AI. And they quickly retooled CDP to be Data Cloud. And it's formed a really strong strategic proposition for Agentforce. Without Data Cloud, you're looking at, I've got my Salesforce data, and then I need to suck it in through APIs or my ETL tools. With Data Cloud, it enables them to do zero-copy data harmonization from any number of different providers. Since we're talking Google partnership here, you see where I'm going. BigQuery has zero-copy into Data Cloud. So we can now take a model we build in Vertex AI and enable that model in Agentforce. And we're not limited just to our Salesforce data. If you're a big Google shop leveraging BigQuery, you easily can zero-copy, harmonize, and unify that data in Salesforce Data Cloud and leverage it to ground these AIs that you're building.
Wow.
So that's it. It's kind of three-pronged across your infrastructure, your applications, and then your data.
No, that's huge. Now, I'm glad you went down the data path because this is a growing topic, it seems. Every time we're getting into AI conversations with customers right now, it's, yes, we can go build a conversational agent, or there's a request around things like agent assist. They want to transcribe, summarize calls. They love to have the data pushed into Salesforce very commonly so that you have this record, you have that activity history of how customers are interacting with you. But the question keeps coming up, though, of many customers they have lots of data. To your point, they've got data in a lot of different places, but it's kind of preparing the data for AI and being able to leverage it for more personalized experiences or to be able to even trigger these agentic workflows. And so I'm curious just kind of on your take of how people are starting to leverage data inside of Salesforce as well as some of these other providers to enable AI experiences inside of Salesforce.
I think the number one driver, in my opinion, of why you use Agentforce should come down to not just the data. I was going to say the data. I think it's data and where the experience needs to live. But the first question I always ask is, where's the data? And if it's not in Salesforce, that's fine. Data Cloud gives you the flexibility to bring it in. But ultimately, the power of Agentforce is its ability to leverage the investments the customers made in the Salesforce platform. And that's been the same since day one, just had Sales Cloud, 1999 Salesforce. That story's never changed. The value of Salesforce has been the interconnected solutions, the interconnected metadata, and the interconnected record level data or file-based data that lived in the platform. And then you always had to go leverage APIs to suck in additional data. The ability for us now to take Data Cloud or to leverage Data Cloud to bring data in through zero copy and then prepare it as well. That's the key part as well, is Data Cloud, I think, is oftentimes misunderstood as just another data lake and another place you can dump data. And its name doesn't do it any favors, like if that's what it sounds like to me as well. But ultimately, its value proposition is really being a data harmonization tool that enables you to bring in external data, unify it together. So instead of us having the Caleb Johnson that we know who filled out a web form, the Caleb Johnson that we've sold 4 different products to, the Caleb Johnson we've got a weird lead for, we're able to unify those together and have one common view of you, which again goes back to that core value of Salesforce. It's putting the customer at the center of the applications, having a grounded data layer that empowers that understanding, and then as we think from how that moves into an agentic experience, having the data that can then ultimately ground the trusted AI experience, which is going to yield good results.
Yeah, okay. I'm learning a lot here, so this is really good. So let's get into the agentic side of stuff for just a second, because I think about a lot of our customers and even our agents, they live inside of Salesforce on a daily basis. They answer calls there, they answer emails, they're managing cases, all the workflows. So when you think about from an agentic standpoint, and I know it's brand new, everyone's still trying to figure out like, how are we going to deploy this? Where are we going to deploy it? I'm curious though, what you're starting to see for those people that are operating on a regular basis inside of Salesforce, whether it's use cases or kind of things they're looking at to deploy agentic inside of the system, inside of Salesforce, kind of regardless of AI. But obviously Google may power some of these things, but the agentic use case, I think, is really the topic right here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be a little controversial for Salesforce here, because Salesforce will tell you that we're in the third wave of AI. If you've gone to a Dreamforce or watched any of their corporate presentations recently, they plan AI across 5 waves, starting with predictive, which we kind of nailed 10 to 15 years ago, moving into generative, which was the advent of GPT. They tell us we are now at this point of digital labor autonomous agents. And that's a lot of the messaging that you'll see from them. They've developed 3 autonomous agents: a service agent, a SDR, a sales development rep, business development rep agent, and a sales coach agent. That's not where we're seeing traction at TTEC Digital and in our conversations with clients. We're seeing that right now, I feel like we're in a half step between the generative experiences, which are the low-hanging fruits. We've got off-the-shelf products in Salesforce terms. That's what we used to call Service Cloud Einstein and Sales Cloud Einstein. I can quickly generate an email for you. I can summarize a contact record or extensive case history. I can summarize a case and do the after-call work for you. These are still incredibly valuable solutions for a lot of clients right now. And that's where we're seeing a lot of traction, is still on getting customers comfortable with leveraging humans and AI together. And that seems to be where customers are as well right now as well. There's some people who are happy to deal with a truly autonomous agent, but I think for a lot of customers, they still feel a disconnect between the empathy that a human brings, the cognitive reasoning that a human brings to the table, and just the responsiveness of the back and forth true human conversation. No matter how great the IVAs are getting with recognition, that you still know it's a robot. And when you're dealing with a service agent on a digital channel, it's still obvious that's not a human who's talking to you. So where we're seeing that value is leveraging the power of AI to process large volumes of data, do summarization, generate new concepts, generate a close plan for me, generate a list of everyone who knows Caleb Johnson and how he's related to them, or quickly closing out cases and finding the right next best offer. These are all really good low-hanging fruits. And I think we're getting very close to pushing into true digital labor, but I don't think the market's quite ready for it yet. And frankly, I don't think a lot of organizations really have their foundational data layer and AI strategy baked well enough to be going in that direction. So I think we're finding these half steps between how do we push customers beyond some of these out-of-box offerings where their value is obvious, but we can do so much more. But how do we still make sure that we're leveraging the best of what humans bring to the table and the best of what AI brings to the table? And that's the empathy, the creativity, and the reasoning married with the sheer processing power and ability to do repetitive tasks without losing their minds on the AI side. And that's how I kind of see it right now.
Oh, I think you're spot on. It's interesting because we see it from a lot of different angles, and there's still, I think, a lot of confusion in the market around agentic and putting a definition to it for the common person, maybe not for the developer. Same way that 18 months ago, everybody was applying Gen AI and to everything. And it was just, we're going to solve this with Gen AI. I think the same thing's happening with agentic. When you can look at some of these, to your point, these out-of-the-box applications that are there of being able to generate an email automatically, or being able to gather a bunch of information about a customer and tie it together and summarize it for you. Yes, it's generative, but there is some level of automation that's actually happening. And so to your point, it's the first step, and some of these are going to continue to venture down the prompt-based path. I think we're still pretty far away, especially from a security standpoint, of everyone just unlocking agentic with full reasoning capabilities and saying, here, yes, have access to my entire set of Salesforce data and just start making decisions for me that may or may not impact my business. So I'm with you there. You kind of hinted on or touched on from the readiness of a data standpoint, kind of the strategy around that and getting ready for agentic. And so I'd like, love to just get your opinion on, as companies are starting to prepare for this and they're starting to think about, okay, I need to, and I got to get my data clean, or what's kind of the steps, the strategy, the approach that you would advise somebody on as they're starting to get ready for more automation around this?
Well, specifically when it comes to Salesforce, I'll speak about this sort of more as a Salesforce expert than a data scientist, which I cannot to be. But when we're thinking about designing an agent, specifically in Salesforce for Agentforce, there's kind of 5 key attributes we look at. And a lot of this comes down to data. So one of them is, what's the role of the agent? What's it actually going to do? Is it going to be assisting someone in a call center? Is it going to be developing new business opportunities? Is it going to be reviewing call scripts and providing coaching advice? What are they going to do, and how do we enable them with the right information to provide that, to do that role and function? The second is then, what is that data? Where does it live? How do we access it? Is it in good shape? And do we have a unified view of that specific piece of data? If it's a client-focused role and function, do we have that unified view of Caleb? If it's reviewing account plans and uncovering white space, do we have a great perspective on our accounts? Can we trust that data? And so on and so forth. So starting with role informs what data we need, because we don't need to be boiling the ocean right now. We need to identify the use case and prep the data according for the use case, trying to get your entire organization's data from the past 50 years ready, prepped, cleaned, and consolidated for overall enterprise AI is going to take much more time.
Sure.
So then we look at actions. What is the agent actually going to do? I like to think this is really where it becomes is it a Salesforce use case for me? I think a lot of the value of Agentforce is grounded in the traditional value of Salesforce, which is speed to value. When you're developing an Agentforce agent, it's literally clicks, not code, drag and dropping. It all comes together incredibly quickly. Most agents I've built, I'm doing them in 30 to 40 minutes.
Wow.
The reason they're that quick, Caleb, is because the actions I want them to do have usually already been built. If it's, I need to find the customer. So I look up to the customer. That flow's built in every organization. I need to look up their case history or their opportunity history so I can summarize it or provide input on it. Well, again, you're writing a simple flow to go get those records. And then usually there's an output action as well. And a lot of those have already been done as well, or can be developed really quickly using the flow builder on Salesforce. So those actions are usually what drive me to, is this an Agentforce agent? If we've developed a lot of those flows and we've got access to the data and we know it's a function that's going to take place somewhere in the Salesforce ecosystem, I start looking at it like, yeah, that probably makes sense. If we haven't developed those actions, it's going to take place in an entirely different environment Salesforce never touches, and we don't even have the data, probably not for Agentforce. And then finally, the last two are guardrails and channels. Guardrails is also reliant on data as well. We need to be able to inform these agents what they can do and what they can't do. Another thing that's very easy to do with the Agentforce builder, but it's reliant on having the data to tell them, don't do that and don't go over here, and building the right restrictions and security around it. And then finally, the channel is an element of metadata as well. Like, do we actually have access to that channel? Are we going to have to build integrations to it? Can it feed from the data that's going to be available to them? So those 5 aspects, role, data, actions, guardrails, channels, is kind of the building blocks, and usually in the Salesforce architect's mind of, is this going to be a good fit for Salesforce? And what data do we need to clean and harmonize to get ready for those 5 elements?
Okay, well, you clearly have a strategy and a methodology, which is really, really nice. So there's a clear plan. People should definitely go back and listen to that again.
But it is tried and true. It has worked pretty well as we've worked with clients to figure out, is this a good fit for Google, or is this a good fit for those building it natively in Salesforce?
Oh, that's great. So I'll wrap up with this, because I'd love to get your take, and I typically kind of ask some question like this of where are we going next? And I know Dreamforce is coming up, and so there's going to be lots of, I'm sure, announcements and new direction on things from Salesforce. But as you see this intersection of AI continuing to grow, is it where Salesforce is going with their, whether you call it roadmap or kind of innovation, but kind of where do you see things heading let's say the next year or two, because I don't know if we can look out too much farther than that.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking sort of about the applications we're talking about here, it's a flattening of the overall platforms. And when we're thinking about Google and Salesforce together, well, let me talk about Salesforce specifically first. I think they had a very defined strategy over the past, let's say, 5 to 8 years of getting people out of Salesforce, which is interesting, but it makes sense when you think about it. Salesforce is very much a solution that was built with the early 2000s in mind, where people sat at desks, they all went to the office every day, and it wasn't uncommon for you to have a CRM type solution sitting open on your desk all day where you're dialing for dollars and filling in the latest updates and the next steps in there. We don't see that as much anymore. Where we do still see it is on the service side, where you've got call centers and people using agent desktops. When you look at the rest of Salesforce's portfolio, though, which is more focused on selling, marketing, operations, they've really been working to lift people out of the desktop to drive adoption, which is funny when you think about it, but where we're able to actually attract people is in productivity and workspace tools, like bringing integration into both Microsoft products and into Google products, and then also leveraging their investments with Slack as well.
Sure.
You have that as an engagement engine for people. Because people like working in their productivity tools. We know that's where we spend the majority of our time, and Salesforce isn't blind to that. So I think the future is going to be that we'll see, they've already made a lot of these advances, like Agentforce is available in Slack, but enabling agents to move beyond the tethering of their platforms. And I think we'll see that both ways. We're seeing that with them enabling you to bring Vertex and Gemini into Agentforce. I think we'll see that moving bidirectionally as well. Agentforce agents being able to be leveraged within Google Workspaces, easily access for agents to be outputting things into a Google Doc or into an Excel sheet, or vice versa. A model that's built on Gemini or running in Vertex, being able to push downstream into Salesforce. And we see a lot of that in the work we're doing in the call center with the CDS and the agent workspaces there. So like I said, we're not looking too far. I don't think that's groundbreaking for anyone, but it's going to help a lot of our clients start to develop their AI strategy instead of looking across, everybody's got an AI solution and I don't know how to invest in tokens and credits. They can start to see where these organizations are forming partnerships and start to place their bets a little bit more strategically of, okay, use Google for hyperscale and performance and compute, and Salesforce and Agentforce is an agent desktop for me, and leverage Slack or Google Workspace. And they start to really narrow these platforms in where they formed these partnerships, and we can flatten agentic experiences across them.
No, it's really interesting. Adam, you're a wealth of information about this. So I really appreciate you coming and spending a few minutes with me. This has been really, really good. So we'll definitely have to have you back soon to kind of give us some updates on anything new that Salesforce is doing. So thank you again, Adam. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you soon.